What if I told you that the very parts of yourself you're most ashamed of, the anger, the envy, the fears you try to hide, might actually be the key to discovering your life's purpose? Most of us are taught to push those feelings down, to bury them, and to present only our best face to the world. We smile when we're supposed to, we hide our weaknesses, and we try to become who society says we should be. But according to Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, this strategy doesn't bring us closer to happiness or fulfillment. Instead, it cuts us off from the very source of our authenticity. Jung believed that inside our dark side lies not just the pain we fear, but the power and potential we need in order to become who we're meant to be. Jung gave this hidden side of the self a name: the shadow. The shadow is everything we repress or deny in ourselves, traits we don't want to admit, emotions we don't want to feel, and even talents we've been taught to ignore. It is the stranger living inside us, the part of our psyche we try to keep locked away. Most of us see the shadow as a threat, something to fight against. But Jung argued that this is a mistake. Ignoring the shadow doesn't make it disappear, it only makes it stronger. If we fail to acknowledge it, it shows up in destructive ways, in our relationships, in our addictions, in our unexplainable anxieties. But when we face it directly, something extraordinary happens. The shadow transforms. It stops being an enemy and becomes a guide. That's the radical message at the heart of Jung's philosophy. Your dark side can reveal your life's purpose. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've been through, the shadow is part of being human. And if you have the courage to confront it, you'll not only discover hidden strengths, but you'll also take a giant step toward becoming your truest self. In the journey Jung called individuation, integrating the shadow is not optional, it's the path to wholeness. In this essay, we'll explore how the shadow forms, how it shapes our lives, how we can work with it, and ultimately, how embracing the darkness within us can reveal the light of purpose we've been searching for. Jung's view of the psyche. To understand Jung's ideas about the dark side, we first need to look at how he understood the human mind. Jung described the psyche as layered, almost like an ocean with hidden depths. At the surface sits the ego, which is the conscious sense of self, the mind that makes choices, navigates daily life, and tries to maintain consistency in how we see ourselves. But beneath the surface lies the personal unconscious, a reservoir of forgotten memories, suppressed emotions, and rejected experiences that didn't quite fit into our conscious identity. Deeper still is the collective unconscious, which Jung described as a shared psychic foundation of humanity. It contains universal patterns and archetypes, symbols like the mother, the hero, the trickster, that show up in myths, stories, and dreams across all cultures. Within this structure, the shadow takes root. The shadow is not a separate being lurking somewhere out there, it is a part of ourselves, born from everything we've repressed or denied. When a child is told not to cry, not to be angry, or not to express too much curiosity, those impulses do not vanish, they retreat into the unconscious, forming the shadow. Over time, society, family, and personal experiences encourage us to cut away aspects of who we are in order to fit in. We build a persona, the social mask we present to others, and in doing so, we cast aside whatever doesn't match that image. What we discard becomes the shadow. This makes the shadow deeply personal, yet universal at the same time. Everyone has traits they hide or suppress, but the particular qualities each person banishes are unique to their upbringing, culture, and personality. For one person, it might be aggression. For another, vulnerability. For someone else, it might be ambition or creativity. This is why Jung stressed that the shadow is not simply bad. It is made up of whatever we've rejected, whether destructive or constructive. Some parts may be harmful if left unacknowledged, while others may actually be essential to our growth. In this way, the shadow represents not just our darkness but also our hidden potential. Defining the shadow. The shadow is one of Jung's most powerful and misunderstood ideas. In everyday language, shadow often means something sinister or evil. But Jung's meaning was broader and more nuanced. The shadow is not the villain inside us. It is the container of everything we cannot or will not admit into our conscious self-image. It is both the side of us that embarrasses us and the side of us that we haven't yet learned to embrace. Think about the qualities you most dislike in others. Do arrogant people drive you crazy? Do you feel impatient with those who are timid or indecisive? Do you get irritated by people who seem too emotional? Jung would suggest that your strong reaction might be a projection, that what you despise in others may reflect traits you've disowned in yourself. Perhaps you are uncomfortable with your own assertiveness, so arrogance in others feels unbearable. Or maybe you suppress your own sensitivity, so seeing someone cry feels intolerable. These triggers are breadcrumbs pointing us toward our shadow. Importantly, the shadow isn't only made up of negative traits. It also contains golden qualities, strengths, talents, and passions that we repressed because they didn't fit the mold we thought we had to follow. A child who was scolded for being too loud might bury their natural charisma and leadership skills. A teenager told their art was impractical might push away their creativity. Over time, these suppressed gifts accumulate in the shadow. When ignored, they leave us feeling incomplete, restless, or stuck. When acknowledged, they can reawaken parts of us that feel deeply aligned with our life's purpose. Jung called this the gold in the shadow, a reminder that our darkness is not just a burden but also a treasure chest of potential. Individuation, the path to wholeness. For Jung, the central aim of human life is individuation, the process of becoming whole, authentic, and integrated. Individuation is not about becoming flawless or idealized, it is about bringing the conscious and unconscious parts of ourselves into harmony. It is about reconciling our ego, persona, and shadow into a self that is not divided against itself. In Jung's view, a person who has integrated their shadow is more balanced, creative, and purposeful because they are no longer wasting energy on repression. The journey of individuation often begins with discomfort. The shadow announces itself through conflicts, dreams, projections, and emotional outbursts. We may feel stuck, anxious, or disillusioned, not realizing that these feelings are signals from the unconscious. Jung emphasized that instead of fleeing from these experiences, we should turn toward them. By doing so, we begin to dialogue with the shadow rather than letting it control us from the dark. Individuation is like opening a door to the parts of ourselves we've been running from and inviting them in. When we begin to integrate the shadow, we often discover new strengths. For instance, someone who repressed their anger might find that beneath it lies passion, drive, and the courage to stand up for themselves. Someone who suppressed their sensitivity may realize that vulnerability is a bridge to deeper relationships. Each time we reclaim a part of the shadow, we gain access to a fuller version of ourselves. Individuation, then, is not a one-time event but a lifelong journey of integration. It is the art of becoming who we already are beneath the masks. Projection, the mirror of the shadow. One of the most powerful ways the shadow reveals itself is through projection. Jung explained that when we repress parts of ourselves, we don't just bury them, they often resurface in the way we see and judge other people. In simple terms, projection is when we attribute our own disowned traits onto someone else. For example, if you are uncomfortable with your own ambition, you might accuse others of being too ambitious or power-hungry. If you deny your own vulnerability, you may feel contempt for people who express fear or sadness. These reactions feel real, but in truth, they are mirrors reflecting what we've pushed into the unconscious. This is why relationships, whether with friends, partners, or colleagues, are such fertile ground for shadow work. The people who irritate us, frustrate us, or trigger us the most often hold up a mirror to the parts of ourselves we don't want to face. This doesn't mean that every negative perception we have of others is just projection. Sometimes people really are behaving badly, but Jung emphasized that the intensity of our reaction is often a clue. If we find ourselves disproportionately angry, jealous, or judgmental, it's worth asking, what is this revealing about me? Learning to recognize projection is a turning point in working with the shadow. Instead of staying stuck in blame or resentment, we can begin to turn inward and reclaim what we've lost. A person who constantly criticizes others for being lazy might realize they've disowned their own need for rest. Someone who is intolerant of arrogance may discover they've repressed their own healthy confidence. Projection shows us, in living color, the pieces of ourselves we've been avoiding. By withdrawing our projections and owning those traits within ourselves, we begin to heal the split between our conscious identity and the shadow. The role of dreams and symbols. For Jung, the unconscious was not just a storehouse of forgotten material, it was alive, dynamic, and constantly trying to communicate with us. One of the primary ways it does this is through dreams. Jung believed dreams are messages from the unconscious, using symbols to express what the conscious mind refuses to see. And often, what appears in dreams are shadow figures, strange, threatening, or embarrassing characters that represent the parts of ourselves we've rejected. Imagine dreaming about being chased by a frightening stranger. To Jung, that stranger is often a shadow figure. It represents something within us that we are running away from in waking life. Or perhaps you dream of an old friend who behaves in an unkind or embarrassing way. That dream character may represent a disowned part of yourself. Jung encouraged people to treat it not as meaningless chaos, but as guides pointing toward the unconscious truths we need to acknowledge. Symbols, too, are central to shadow work. The unconscious often speaks in archetypes: the villain, the trickster, the monster. These are not random images but universal expressions of human experience. When a monster appears in a dream, it may symbolize the fears we've buried. When a trickster shows up, it may represent the parts of ourselves that defy rules and conventions. By engaging with these symbols, through reflection, journaling, or therapy, we begin to translate the language of the unconscious. Dreams and symbols become maps showing us where our shadow lies hidden and how we might bring it into the light. Shadow integration in practice. Acknowledging the shadow is only the first step. Jung emphasized the importance of integration, bringing shadow elements into conscious awareness and weaving them into our lives in a balanced way. This is delicate work because the shadow contains both destructive impulses and hidden gifts. The goal is not to indulge every shadow impulse but to recognize and transform them. Take anger, for example. If ignored, anger may erupt as violence or resentment. But when acknowledged and integrated, anger can transform into assertiveness, passion, and the energy to set healthy boundaries. The same is true for fear. Repressed fear may paralyze us, but when faced, it sharpens our instincts and teaches us caution. Even envy, when integrated, can reveal what we truly value and motivate us to pursue it. Integration means turning destructive energy into constructive fuel. In practice, shadow integration can take many forms. It might involve therapy, where we explore projections and unconscious patterns with guidance. It can involve creative expression, art, writing, or music that allows us to give form to the parts of ourselves we don't usually express. It can involve honest self-reflection, where we notice recurring triggers and ask what they might be teaching us. The key is to approach the shadow with curiosity rather than judgment. When we engage with it openly, it begins to reveal its lessons. And as we integrate these lessons, we move closer to our authentic purpose. Archetypes and life's purpose. At the heart of Jung's philosophy is the idea of archetypes, universal symbols that shape human behavior and meaning. Archetypes like the hero, the sage, the rebel, and the caregiver are not just characters in myths and stories, they are patterns that live within us. Each of us resonates more strongly with certain archetypes, and Jung believed that understanding these inner patterns can help us uncover our life's purpose. The shadow plays a crucial role in this process. Every archetype has a shadow form. The hero can become the tyrant. The caregiver can become the martyr. The sage can become the cynic. By exploring the shadow side of our dominant archetypes, we begin to see where we may have gone off course and how we can return to balance. For example, someone who identifies strongly with the rebel archetype may discover that their shadow side is destructive defiance, rebelling for the sake of chaos. By integrating this shadow, they can transform rebellion into a positive force for change and innovation. In this way, the shadow doesn't just challenge us, it directs us toward purpose. By wrestling with the darker aspects of our archetypes, we clarify who we are and what role we are meant to play in the world. Purpose is not found by denying the shadow but by acknowledging and transforming it. Jung's philosophy suggests that our destiny is hidden not only in our strengths but also in the very flaws and struggles we are most tempted to hide. Modern applications of shadow work. Although Jung developed his theories in the early 20th century, shadow work has never been more relevant than it is today. We live in a world where social media encourages us to display only our highlight reels, our best moments, our polished successes, our filtered smiles. Yet underneath, many people struggle with anxiety, depression, imposter syndrome, and unacknowledged pain. Jung would say this cultural obsession with the persona, our social mask, creates an equally massive shadow. What we suppress collectively spills out in rising polarization, hostility, and disconnection. Shadow work, therefore, is not just personal, it's social and cultural. In therapy, Jung's ideas are alive and well. Modern approaches like internal family systems, IFS, depth psychology, and even mindfulness practices echo Jung's insight that we must embrace all parts of ourselves. People who engage in shadow work often report breakthroughs. They stop repeating destructive relationship patterns, they reclaim creative passions, and they feel less fragmented. By making peace with their inner contradictions, they find more authentic relationships and greater resilience. Outside therapy, shadow work has found its way into leadership training, creativity workshops, and even spiritual practices. Leaders who learn to confront their own insecurities and blind spots become more compassionate and effective. Artists who face their inner critics often unlock bold new expressions of creativity. Spiritual seekers who acknowledge their shadow find their practices grounded in reality rather than spiritual bypassing. The applications are endless, but the core lesson remains: ignoring the shadow limits us, while integrating it sets us free. Challenges and risks of shadow work. As empowering as shadow work can be, it is not without challenges. Jung himself warned that facing the unconscious can feel overwhelming. The shadow contains aspects of ourselves we have avoided for years, sometimes decades. When they surface, it can bring up shame, fear, or grief. This is why Jung emphasized the need for patience, courage, and often guidance. Diving too quickly or recklessly into shadow material can destabilize us. Integration must be gradual, like slowly letting our eyes adjust to the dark. Another challenge is the temptation to rationalize or excuse harmful behavior under the banner of shadow integration. For example, someone might justify cruelty or selfishness by saying they are simply embracing their shadow. But this is not what Jung intended. Integration is not about indulging every impulse. It is about acknowledging impulses consciously, understanding where they come from, and transforming them into healthier forms of expression. Anger can become passion. Fear can become wisdom. Envy can become motivation. Without this transformation, shadow work risks becoming an excuse for destructive patterns rather than a path to growth. Finally, shadow work is difficult because it requires deep honesty. It is much easier to blame the world for our struggles than to admit our own complicity. Jung believed that true growth comes when we are willing to look unflinchingly at ourselves, to admit that we, too, are capable of selfishness, cruelty, or weakness. This humility is not comfortable, but it is liberating. By owning our darkness, we stop being controlled by it. The challenge of shadow work is precisely what makes it transformative. Conclusion. Carl Jung's philosophy offers us a radical reframe of the human experience. Our dark side is not our downfall, it is our doorway. The shadow, with all its repressed fears, impulses, and hidden gifts is not something to be destroyed but something to be integrated. When we face our shadow, we stop running from ourselves. We stop projecting our unacknowledged traits onto others. We begin to live from a place of authenticity rather than pretense. And in doing so, we take a profound step toward discovering our life's purpose. This journey of integration, what Jung called individuation, is not easy. It asks us to confront discomfort, to step into the unknown, and to dismantle the masks we've carefully built. But it also rewards us with wholeness. In the cracks where we once saw only weakness, we find hidden strength. In the flaws we tried to hide, we discover the seeds of our greatest talents. The shadow is not just a container of darkness, it is a wellspring of creativity, resilience, and meaning. So if you find yourself haunted by doubts, frustrated by your flaws, or stuck in cycles you can't explain, Jung would encourage you to look not away, but inward. The answers you seek are not out there in someone else's definition of success or perfection. They are inside you, waiting in the very places you've been afraid to look. Your shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. And by listening to it, you may just find the purpose that makes your life feel whole.